After he learned about her sick daughter, the CEO went quiet, like his ego finally sat down. Then he asked a question that didn't belong in that moment at all. Are you happy in your marriage? She almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was audacity funny. My child is fighting for her life, and this man is asking about my marriage? She stared at him for half a second, then answered without thinking, Are you happy with your girlfriends? The words slipped out before she could stop them. The effect was immediate. His face changed, not anger, not arrogance, just shock. For the first time since the lift stopped, he had nothing to say. Yeah, that's what I thought. The silence inside the stuck lift felt heavier than the air. Two strangers, one broken machine, and a truth neither of them had planned to reveal. Moments earlier, he had been barking orders, demanding answers, acting like power could force metal to move. Now he stood there, exposed, no escape. She leaned against the wall, exhausted. I shouldn't even be here. I should be at the hospital. The lift shook slightly, then went still again. The CEO realized this wasn't just an inconvenience. And she realized something else, too. This man doesn't know how to handle real pain. The 20th floor of Caraway Industries gleamed like money itself. Marble floors so polished they reflected the chandeliers, glass walls that made privacy a luxury, and air that smelled faintly of leather and ambition. People moved through the space like chess pieces, aware of their place, careful not to disturb the order. Winslow Caraway owned every inch of it. He stood near the conference room, tall and immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His hair was touched with silver at the temples, distinguished, not old. His jaw was set in that permanent expression of a man who expected the world to work exactly as he commanded. And usually it did. The quarterly reports need to be on my desk by 3, he said to his assistant, not bothering to look at her. Not 3:15. 3. Yes, Mr. Caraway. He moved through the office like weather. People adjusted around him, stepped aside, lowered their voices. Respect, some called it. Fear, others whispered when he wasn't listening. Reputation was everything to Winslow. He'd built his empire on precision, control, an image so carefully curated that even his charity work made headlines. He didn't just succeed, he was seen succeeding. Near the far wall, barely visible in the morning rush, Dorothea Rigg pushed a cleaning cart toward the executive washroom. Dottie. She kept her head down, shoulders slightly hunched, moving with the kind of exhaustion that lives in the bones. Her uniform was clean but worn, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that had started to fray. She was 42 but looked older. Life had a way of doing that when it pressed down hard enough. Some people on the floor didn't even know her real name. They called her the cleaner, like that was all she was. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with trembling fingers. Hospital. Her chest tightened. She answered, voice barely above a whisper. This is Dottie. The nurse's voice was calm, clinical. Pearl's fever had spiked again. They were monitoring her closely. No, she didn't need to come right away, but they wanted her to know. Dottie closed her eyes, swallowed the lump in her throat, and whispered, Thank you. I'll be there as soon as I can. She hung up, stood there for a moment, staring at nothing. Pearl, sweet Pearl, with her father's stubborn chin and her mother's hopeful eyes. 7 years old, and fighting a battle no child should have to fight. Dottie wiped her face quickly, tucked the phone away, and kept moving. She had 4 more hours on her shift. 4 more hours before she could run to the hospital and sit beside her daughter's bed, holding her small hand, praying for miracles she couldn't afford. And at home, things weren't getting better. Vernon had been talking differently lately, like a man who didn't want to be around, like the sickness had turned their home into something he wanted to escape instead of fight for. She reached the executive lounge and began emptying the trash bins. "Excuse me." The voice cut through the air like a whip. Dottie turned. Winslow Carroway stood in the doorway, his expression sharp. "You missed a spot yesterday," he said, pointing to a corner near the coffee station. There was a napkin on the floor. Her stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carroway." Sorry doesn't fix negligence." The word hit her like a slap. Negligence. As if her entire worth could be reduced to a missed napkin. "I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." "You're right. It won't." He stepped closer, and suddenly there were other people watching. Assistants, junior executives, people who worked on his floor and knew better than to interfere. "You're fired." The words landed with the weight of a door slamming shut. Dottie's breath caught. "Mr. Carroway, please, I have a daughter who's—" "I don't pay you to have problems. I pay you to do your job. Clean out your locker." Her throat burned. She wanted to explain, to beg, to tell him about Pearl and the hospital bills and the way her husband had stopped looking at her like she mattered. But pride, broken, battered pride, kept her silent. She nodded once, grabbed her cart, and walked toward the service elevator. Winslow watched her go, already dismissing the moment from his mind. He had a lunch meeting at 1. A board call at 2. A reputation to maintain. He stepped into the executive lift, pressed a button for the lobby, and stood with his arms crossed, reviewing his mental checklist. The doors were about to close when a hand shot through. "Dottie." She stepped inside, eyes red but dry, and moved the opposite corner without a word. The door slid shut. The lift descended smoothly for exactly 4 seconds. Then it jolted, stopped. The lights flickered. Winslow hit the emergency button. Nothing. He hit it again, harder. What the... The intercom crackled to life. "We're experiencing a mechanical issue. Technician is delayed. Please remain calm. We're trying to reach someone now." Remain calm. Winslow spun toward Dottie. "Did you press something?" She looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "No." "Are you sure?" "Because this lift was working fine until—" "I didn't touch anything." He paced a small space, yanking his phone from his pocket. No signal. "Of course. This is unacceptable," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Do they have any idea who's in here?" Dottie said nothing. She leaned against the wall, closed her eyes, and tried to breathe. The minutes dragged. Winslow kept pressing buttons, checking his phone, muttering about incompetence and lawsuits and how heads would roll when he got out. Dottie's phone buzzed again. She looked at the screen. Another call from the hospital. Her hands shook as she answered. "Hello." The nurse's voice was quieter this time. Pearl was asking for her. She was scared. "I'm coming," Dottie whispered, her voice breaking. "Tell her I'm coming." She hung up and pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to hold herself together. "Are you crying?" Winslow asked, incredulous. She didn't answer. Unbelievable. "I'm stuck in a broken lift, and you're—" "My daughter is dying." The words came out raw, unfiltered, too loud for the small space. Winslow froze. Dottie looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw her, really saw her. Not the cleaner, not the employee, the mother. "She's 7, Dottie said, her voice shaking. "She has a rare blood disorder. She's been in the hospital for 3 weeks. I just got fired, and I have no idea how I'm going to pay for her treatment. And she's asking for me, and I'm stuck in here with you." The silence was suffocating. Winslow's mouth opened, then closed. All the words he'd been ready to throw about inconvenience, about schedules, about his reputation, died in his throat. He looked at her, really looked, and saw the exhaustion etched into her face, the tremble in her hands, the weight she'd been carrying alone. For the first time in years, Winslow Carroway had nothing to say. The lift groaned softly, settling deeper into its mechanical failure. Two people trapped, not just in a lift, but in lives they couldn't escape. Winslow sat down on the floor. It was such an unusual sight, a man in a $3,000 suit sitting on the floor of a stalled lift, that Dottie almost didn't register at first. He didn't speak, just sat there, forearms resting on his knees, staring at the closed doors like they held answers. Dottie wiped her face with the back of her hand and tried to steady her breathing. The phone in her pocket felt like a brick. Every second in here was a second away from Pearl. How long had she been sick? Winslow asked quietly. Dottie blinked. What? Your daughter. How long? She hesitated. Why did he care? Why now? 6 months, she said finally. It started with bruising, then the nosebleeds, then the tests, then the diagnosis. What's the prognosis? She needs a bone marrow transplant. We're on a waiting list. But even if we find a match... Her voice cracked. The cost is astronomical. My insurance barely covers a fraction of it. Winslow nodded slowly, processing. What about your husband? Dottie laughed bitterly. Vernon works. Barely. He's tired. We're all tired. But he's checked out. He doesn't sit with her anymore. Doesn't ask how she's doing. He just disappears. Winslow was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the control panel, and started examining the buttons with a focus he hadn't shown before. There has to be a manual override, he muttered. Dottie watched him, confused by the shift. One moment he was listening, the next he was solving. Help me, he said, glancing back at her. Pound on the walls. Someone will hear us. She pushed off the wall and joined him. They shouted, banged, made as much noise as two people could make in a metal box. Several long minutes later, the intercom crackled again. We're still trying to reach a technician. Stay with us. Please keep making noise so we can locate you. Winslow hit the wall with his palm. Move faster. Dottie closed her eyes and prayed. When the lift finally jolted back to life, the descent felt agonizingly slow. The doors opened to the lobby, and Dottie bolted. She didn't say goodbye, didn't look back, just ran. Winslow stood in the open lift, watching her disappear through the glass doors. His assistant appeared at his side, tablet in hand. Mr. Carroway, your lunch meeting is in 15 minutes. Should I? Cancel it. Sir, cancel the meeting. Cancel everything for today. He walked to his office, closed the door, and stood at the window overlooking the city. For 30 years, he'd built his life around control, around reputation, around the idea that power meant never being vulnerable. But standing in that lift, listening to a woman break open in front of him, he'd felt something he hadn't felt in years. Shame, not because he'd fired her, though that was bad enough, but because he'd built a world where people like Dottie were invisible until they weren't useful anymore. He picked up his phone and made a call. General Hospital Billing Department? I need to pay for a pediatric patient's treatment. Name, Pearl Rigg. 7 years old. I don't need medical details. I just want to clear whatever I can clear. Transplant medication. Follow-up care. Tell me what the total looks like and how to wire it. The person on the other end hesitated. Sir, I can't disclose private details, but I can direct you to our financial services office for payment arrangements. Do that. Minutes later, he was transferred. He gave his name, his company, and one instruction. Mark it as an anonymous donation. No press. No recognition. Just pay it. Mr. Carroway, are you sure? Do it now. He hung up. Then he sat there, staring at his desk, wondering what kind of man he'd become. and whether it was too late to change. Dottie burst through the hospital doors 2 hours later, breathless and frantic. She found Pearl's room and pushed inside. Pearl was awake, pale but smiling weakly. Vernon sat in the corner, scrolling through his phone. "Mama," Pearl whispered. Dottie rushed to her side, took her small hand, and kissed her forehead. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." A nurse entered moments later, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Rigg, can I speak with you outside?" Dottie's heart dropped. "Is something wrong?" "No. Actually, the opposite." They stepped into the hallway. The nurse lowered her voice. "Your daughter's treatment has been paid for. In full." Dottie stared at her. "What?" "Someone made an anonymous payment. $500,000. It covers the transplant, the medications, the follow-up care, everything." Dottie's knees went weak. "Who?" "They didn't leave a name, but it's legitimate. The funds are already in the account." Dottie leaned against the wall, her mind spinning. Anonymous. $500,000. No one she knew had that kind of money. No one except... No, it couldn't be. But the timing... She thanked the nurse and returned to Pearl's room, her thoughts a storm. Vernon barely looked up. What did she want? Someone paid for Pearl's treatment. That got his attention. What? Who? I don't know. Vernon frowned. That doesn't make sense. People don't just hand out $500,000. Maybe they do. But even as she said it, Dottie felt the weight of the gift settling on her shoulders. Because gifts this big always came with strings. Didn't they? The next morning, Dottie returned to Caraway Industries. She came with visitor badge, a small box for her locker items, and a heart that wouldn't stop pounding. She wasn't sure why. Maybe to collect her things. Maybe to get answers. She found Winslow in his office, standing by the window. He turned when she entered, his expression unreadable. You paid for it, she said. Not a question. He didn't deny it. Yes. Why? Because I could. That's not an answer. Winslow sighed, walked to his desk, and leaned against it. I was cruel to you. I humiliated you. And when I heard about your daughter, I realized something. He paused. Power doesn't mean anything if you use it to hurt people. Dottie crossed her arms. So this is guilt money. No, it's the right thing. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's a debt. She shook her head. I don't owe you anything. I didn't say you did. His voice softened. I said I owe you for treating you like you were invisible, for making assumptions, for being the kind of man who fires someone without asking why they're struggling. Dottie stood there, torn between gratitude and suspicion. What do you want from me? Nothing. People like you always want something. Winslow met her eyes. Then I guess I'm trying to be different. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Dottie nodded. Thank you. For my daughter. You're welcome. She turned to leave. Dottie. She stopped. Your job. If you want it back, it's yours. She looked over her shoulder. I don't want to be a cleaner anymore. Then don't. I'll find you something better. Why? Because you deserve better. Dottie studied him, searching for the trap, the angle, the hidden cost. But all she saw was a man who looked tired, a man who was starting to change, and a woman who didn't trust it yet. 3 weeks later, the office was buzzing. Winslow Caraway had been seen at the hospital. Winslow Caraway had paid for someone's treatment. Winslow Caraway had offered a cleaner a promotion. The rumors spread like wildfire. He's sleeping with her. He's using her. He has no standards. He would sleep with anyone. Typical. Rich men think they can buy anything. Octavia Sloan, one of the senior vice presidents, stood by the water cooler, listening to the gossip with a carefully neutral expression. She'd worked with Winslow for 8 years. She knew him better than most. And she knew the truth. Winslow had always helped women. Quietly, without fanfare. He'd paid for his secretary's mother's surgery. He'd given a junior analyst time off when her father died. He'd written recommendation letters for interns who needed a leg up, but no one remembered those things. They only remembered the image, the powerful, untouchable CEO who moved through life like a shark. And now that image was being weaponized against him. Octavia walked into his office later that afternoon. Winslow sat at his desk, reading a contract, his jaw tight. "You've heard," she said. "I've heard. It's bad." "I know." Octavia sat down across from him. "Why did you do it?" "Because it was the right thing." "Since when do you care about the right thing?" Winslow looked up, his eyes sharp. "Careful, Octavia." She held his gaze. "I'm not attacking you. I'm asking. You've spent your entire career building a reputation. Now you're letting it crumble over a woman you barely know. She's not just a woman. She's a mother trying to save her daughter. And you're a CEO who's supposed to be above this." Winslow leaned back in his chair. "Maybe I'm tired of being above it." Octavia studied him, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But you need to control the narrative. The board is watching. Investors are asking questions. If you don't do something, this will destroy you. What do you suggest?" "Date someone. Publicly. Someone respectable. Someone who makes the rumors go away." Winslow laughed bitterly. "You want me to fake a relationship?" "I want you to survive." He thought about it for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Set it up." The woman's name was Monica. She was beautiful, polished, and calculated. They met at an upscale restaurant. Cameras conveniently nearby. Monica smiled, ordered the most expensive wine, and got straight to the point. "I'll do this for 6 months," she said. "Attend events, take photos, play the part. But it's going to cost you." "How much?" $500,000. Winslow's stomach turned. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" She didn't. She looked at him like he was a transaction, a means to an end, just like everyone else. Winslow stood, threw cash on the table, and walked out. Monica called after him. "You'll regret this." But he didn't look back, because he just realized something. He'd spent his entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Money, status, access. No one had ever just wanted him. Meanwhile, across the city, Dottie's home was falling apart. Vernon had been distant for weeks, coming home late, barely speaking, avoiding Pearl's room entirely. Dottie tried to reach him, tried to pull him back, but it was like grabbing smoke. One night, she found him in the kitchen, staring at his laptop. "What are you looking at?" she asked. He closed the screen quickly. "Nothing." "Vernon." "I said it's nothing." She walked over and opened the laptop. Job listings. All of them international. Long hours. High pay. Far from home. "You're leaving," she said, her voice flat. "I'm looking at options. Options to leave your family." Vernon stood, his face hard. "I can't do this anymore, Dottie. I can't watch her die. I can't sit in that hospital and pretend everything's going to be okay. She's not dying. The treatment is working because someone paid for it, not because of anything I did. You could have been there for her. You could have held her hand. You could have." "I'm suffocating," Vernon shouted. "Every day it's hospitals and bills and fear, and I can't breathe." Dottie stared at him, her chest tight. "So you run." "I need space." "She needs a father." Vernon grabbed his coat. "I'm going out." "Where?" He didn't answer. Just left. Dottie stood alone in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. Pearl called from her bedroom. "Mama?" Dottie wiped her eyes, forced a smile, and went to her daughter. 2 days later, Vernon showed up at Caraway Industries. He pushed past the receptionist, marched up to Winslow's office, and slammed the door open. Winslow looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" "I'm Vernon Rigg, Dottie's husband." Winslow stood slowly. "I see. I need a job." "We're not hiring." "I don't care. I need a job with long hours, 20-hour shifts, overtime, something that pays well and keeps me busy." Winslow studied him carefully. "Why?" "Because I need to provide for my family." "Your family? The one you're trying to run from?" Vernon's jaw tightened. "I don't know what my wife told you, but she didn't tell me anything. I can see it for myself." Vernon stepped closer. "Look, I don't care what you think of me. I just need the job." Winslow leaned against his desk, arms crossed. He already suspected the husband was using her, and now he wanted proof. "I'll make you a deal," Winslow said slowly. Vernon's eyes lit up. "What kind of deal?" "I'll secure you a position. High pay. Any hours you want. But there's a condition." "What condition?" "Your wife attends a business reception with me. One night. Professional. Public." Vernon frowned. "Why?" "Because I need someone trustworthy by my side. And she's proven herself to be exactly that." It was a lie. But it was a lie designed to reveal the truth. Vernon hesitated, thinking. Winslow watched him closely, and then Vernon nodded. "Fine. She'll do it." Winslow smiled coldly. "You didn't even ask her." "She'll understand. It's for our future." "Of course." Vernon left, satisfied. Winslow stood there, his suspicions confirmed. The husband didn't love her. He loved what he could get from her. Both characters realized the same truth from opposite sides. The people closest to you can hurt you the most. Vernon came home that night with a smile Dottie hadn't seen in months. "I got a job," he said, setting his keys on the counter. Dottie looked up from the bills she'd been sorting. "Where?" "Caraway Industries. Great pay. Long hours. It's exactly what we need." "How did you?" "I went and asked. Turns out your boss is more reasonable than you thought." Dottie's stomach twisted. "You went to Winslow?" "Yeah. He made me an offer." "What kind of offer?" Vernon hesitated, then shrugged. "He needs someone to attend a company event with him. Something professional. He asked if you'd go." The room went cold. "What did you say?" "I said yes." Dottie stood slowly. "You told him I'd go, without asking me." "It's one night, Dottie. One night, and I get a job that can actually support us." "So you sold me." Vernon's face hardened. "Don't be dramatic. It's a business event. Nothing more." "You don't know that." "I know we need the money. I know Pearl needs stability. And I know you'd do anything for her. So why not this?" Dottie stared at him, the man she'd married, and saw a stranger. "Because my dignity is negotiable." "Your dignity doesn't pay the bills." The words hung in the air like poison. Dottie turned away, her hands shaking. Vernon softened slightly. "Look, I'm not saying it's ideal, but it's one night. You'll smile, shake some hands, and it's done. And then I have a job that can give us a real future. A future you'll actually be part of." Vernon didn't answer. Dottie closed her eyes. She thought of Pearl, still recovering, still fragile. She thought of the bills that kept coming. She thought of the weight she'd been carrying alone. And she hated herself for what she said next. "Fine. I'll go." Vernon's relief was immediate. "Thank you. You won't regret this." But she already did. The night of the reception, Dottie stood in front of her closet. staring at clothes she hadn't worn in years. She chose a simple black dress, elegant but not flashy. She put on minimal makeup, tied her hair back, and looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. Vernon drove her to the venue, a luxury hotel downtown. He didn't come inside. "I'll pick you up at 11, he said, already pulling away. Dottie walked into the ballroom alone. The room was filled with people who belonged, executives, investors, politicians. Everyone was polished, confident, at ease. She felt like an imposter. Winslow appeared at her side, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. "You came," he said quietly. "I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice." She met his eyes. "Is there?" He didn't answer. The evening passed in a blur of introductions, small talk, and forced smiles. Winslow stayed close, guiding her through conversations, making her feel less alone. But she couldn't shake the weight of what this was. A transaction. Her dignity traded for her husband's escape. When the event finally ended, Winslow walked her outside. "Your husband isn't here," he said, checking his watch. Dottie's phone buzzed. A text from Vernon. "Running late. Wait inside." She closed her eyes. Of course. Winslow gestured to his car. "Let me take you home." She wanted to refuse, but she was exhausted. They drove in silence for a while. Then Winslow spoke. "The job I offered your husband. It's abroad." Dottie's head snapped toward him. "What?" "Singapore. High pay. Long hours. Exactly what he asked for." "When does he leave?" 2 weeks. Dottie's chest tightened. "And me?" "You stay." She stared at him, realization dawning. "You planned this." "I gave him exactly what he wanted, and he took it, without hesitation, without asking you, without caring." Dottie's voice shook. "You used me to test him. I used the situation to reveal him. You had no right. Maybe not, but now you know the truth." She wanted to be angry. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't, because deep down she'd already known. Vernon had stopped fighting for their family. The moment fighting became hard. Winslow pulled up to her building. "I'm sorry. I know this hurts." Dottie opened the door, then paused. "Why do you care?" "Because you deserve better than a man who sees you as expendable." She stepped out of the car, her heart breaking and mending at the same time. The husband exposed, the cleaner free, the CEO holding the weight of what he orchestrated. Vernon left for Singapore 2 weeks later. He didn't fight, didn't argue, didn't even seem conflicted. He packed his bags, kissed Pearl on the forehead, briefly, awkwardly, and told Dottie he'd send money. Then he was gone. Dottie stood in the empty apartment, staring at the space he'd left behind. She didn't cry. She just breathed. A month passed. Pearl's health improved steadily. The transplant had been successful. She was laughing again, playing again, being a child again. Dottie had taken a new position at Caraway Industries, assistant project manager. Real work, real pay, real respect. She saw Winslow occasionally in the office. They exchanged polite nods, brief conversations. But there was a distance between them now, a distance built on guilt, gratitude, and unspoken truths. One evening, Winslow appeared at her desk. "Can we talk?" She looked up, surprised. "About what?" "About what I did. About your husband. About the way I manipulated the situation." Dottie set down her pen. "You want to apologize?" "I want to explain." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Go ahead." Winslow sat, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. "I watched you carry the weight of your world alone," he said quietly. "And I watched your husband treat you like a burden, like something he could trade away when it became convenient. I couldn't just stand by and let that continue. So you played God. Maybe, but I don't regret it. Dottie leaned back in her chair. You exposed him. You humiliated me. You made me feel like I was part of some twisted game. I never wanted you to feel that way. But I did. Winslow nodded, accepting the weight of her words. I'm sorry. Truly, I crossed a line. But I'd do it again if it meant you'd see what he was. Dottie was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I already knew. Winslow blinked. What? I already knew he didn't love me anymore. I knew he was looking for a way out. I just didn't want to admit it. Then why did you stay? Because I had a daughter to fight for, and I didn't have the luxury of giving up. Winslow's throat tightened. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. I'm tired. I know. They sat in the quiet. Two people who'd seen each other at their worst and somehow still remained. Finally, Winslow spoke again. I'd like to take you to dinner. A real dinner. No business. No deals. No expectations. Dottie looked at him, searching his face for the angle, the trap, the cost. But all she saw was a man who'd changed. A man who'd seen his own flaws reflected in a stranger's pain and decided to do better. Why? She asked. Because I want to know you, not as an employee, not as a project, just as Dottie. She smiled faintly. And if I say no, then I'll respect that, and I'll leave you alone. Dottie thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation, the lift, the hospital, the test, the truth, and she realized something. Winslow hadn't saved her. She'd saved herself. But he'd been willing to stand beside her when no one else would. Okay, she said quietly. Winslow's face lit up. Okay. One dinner. No promises. No promises. The dinner was simple. A quiet restaurant, soft lighting, no cameras. They talked about everything except work. About Pearl's recovery. About Winslow's lonely childhood. About the dreams they both abandoned along the way. And for the first time in years, Dottie felt seen. Not as a cleaner. Not as a mother. Not as someone's wife. Just as herself. Over the following months, they saw each other more. Coffee before work. Walks in the park with Pearl. Quiet evenings where they just existed together, without pressure. Winslow learned what it meant to love without leverage. Dottie learned what it meant to be chosen, not because she was useful, but because she was worth it. 6 months after Vernon left, Dottie received divorce papers in the mail. She signed them without hesitation. Pearl asked once where Daddy was. Dottie knelt down, held her daughter's hands, and said, Daddy needed to find himself, but we're going to be okay. Better than okay. And she meant it. 1 year later, Winslow stood in his office, looking out at the city. His reputation had changed, not because he'd manufactured it, but because he'd earned it. People no longer whispered about his cruelty. They talked about his fairness, his integrity, his quiet generosity. He'd become the man he'd always pretended to be. Dottie appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use this, she said, handing him one. Winslow smiled. You always know. I'm learning. They stood together, side by side, watching the city move below. Do you ever regret it? Dottie asked quietly. Everything that happened? Winslow thought about the lift, the hospital, the test, the choice. No, he said, not for a second. Good. She reached for his hand. He took it, and they stood there, 2 people who'd survived the worst and found something worth keeping. Not because someone had saved them, but because they'd chosen to save each other. Pearl ran into the office moments later, laughing, holding a drawing she'd made in the waiting room. Look what I made, she said, holding up proudly. It was a picture of 3 people, a woman, a man and a little girl, all holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Winslow knelt down to her level. "That's beautiful, Pearl." "It's us," she said, beaming. "Our family." Dottie's breath caught. Winslow looked up at her, his eyes soft. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It is. When someone truly loves you, you don't get used. You get saved, not by money, not by power, but by presence, by choice, by someone who sees your worth when the world tells you you're invisible. And sometimes the person who needs saving the most is the one who thought he had everything, because wealth without compassion is just noise, and power without love is just loneliness dressed in expensive clothes." Winslow Carroway learned that in a broken lift. Dorothea Rigg learned it in a hospital room. And together, they learned what it means to rebuild a life. Not on reputation or desperation, but on truth, dignity, and the quiet courage to choose love when it would have been easier to walk away.